A virgin maid entered the mansion with her body wounded and her eyes begging for help. But a millionaire with a devastated soul saw in her the reflection of something he had lost. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. Continuing. The light drizzle tinted the sky with leaden tones on that suffocating March afternoon. The wet asphalt reflected the diffuse lights of the streetlights that were beginning to come on, while Livia walked with hesitant steps down the street. Her simple cotton dress, soaked by the rain, revealed the delicate curves of her 19 years, but also the dark marks that stained her fair skin. The bruise on her left arm throbbed like a painful reminder of what she had left behind. Her brown eyes, framed by dark circles, scanned the high walls of the mansions with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Each house was a world apart from her own, a universe protected by electric fences and security cameras. The battered bag she carried contained everything she had managed to gather in her desperate escape: a few crumpled documents, 2 changes of clothes, and a few coins that jingled as a constant reminder of her poverty. The Montserrat mansion stood imposingly at the end of the street, like a fortress of concrete and glass. The wrought-iron gates seemed even more intimidating in the dim light of dusk. Livia stopped in front of them, her heart hammering against her ribs. The job ad she had seen in the local paper was her last hope. Maid wanted for high-end residence, internal work regime, proven experience. She had experience, but not the kind you put on a resume. Since she was 12 when her mother died, in circumstances that were never explained, Livia had learned how to take care of a house. First to please the distant grandmother who took her in, then to survive the stepfather who had turned her adolescence into a nightmare of silent violence. Every mark on her body told a story she would rather forget. The intercom buzzed as she pressed the button with trembling fingers. A deep, authoritative male voice cut through the silence. "Yes?" "Good afternoon, I came because of the job posting," she replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "For the maid position." There was a moment of silence that seemed to last an eternity. Then, with a metallic click, the gate slowly began to open. Livia walked through the immaculate garden, feeling small and out of place among the marble statues and geometrically arranged flower beds. The rain had turned into a thick mist that seemed to swallow the contours of the mansion. It was when the front door opened that she saw him for the first time. Caio Montserrat was the personification of the power that the house exuded. Tall, with his 42 years marked in severe lines on his well-sculpted face, he exuded an aura of natural authority. His well-trimmed beard framed firm lips that seemed unaccustomed to smiling. His eyes, a deep and enigmatic green, studied Livia with an intensity that made her shiver. "Come in," he ordered, his voice even more impressive up close. "You're soaking wet." Livia stepped through the threshold as if through a portal into another world. The interior of the mansion was a study in restrained luxury, with antique furniture and artwork that seemed to regard her with the same scrutiny as its owner. A black grand piano dominated the main room, its polished surface reflecting the shadows like a nocturnal lake. "Sit down." Caio indicated a leather armchair, and Livia obeyed, trying not to wet the expensive upholstery. He remained standing, his hands in the pockets of his impeccable suit, studying her with an indecipherable expression. "What's your name?" "Livia." "Livia Santos," she replied, aware of how small her voice sounded in that imposing environment. "Do you have any references?" The question hit her like a blow. "No, sir," she admitted, feeling the dream of a safe haven slipping through her fingers like rainwater. "But I can work. I can learn anything I need to." Something in the tone of his voice must have touched something in Caio, because his gaze changed subtly. He moved closer, and for the first time, Livia noticed a shadow of vulnerability in his eyes, like a crack in a perfect mask. "Are you running from something?" he asked, his voice softer now. Livia felt the air leave her lungs. How could he know? Were the marks on her body that obvious? Or was it something in her eyes, some sign of the fear she carried like a second skin? "We all are," she replied in a whisper, surprising herself with the raw honesty of her words. A thick silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of rain on the windows and the distant ticking of an antique clock. Caius watched her as if trying to decipher a particularly complex puzzle. After a moment that seemed like an eternity, he walked over to a nearby desk and took some papers from a drawer. "The job is internal, as stated in the ad," he began, his voice returning to its professional tone. "You will be responsible for general cleaning, organizing the house, and preparing meals. Your room will be in the staff annex with a private bathroom. Sundays off." He paused, his eyes meeting hers again. "I do not receive visitors, and I value my privacy very much. There are areas of the house that will remain closed and are strictly off-limits. Failure to comply with this rule will result in immediate termination." Livia nodded, absorbing every word. The restrictions didn't bother her. She was used to living within limits, behind closed doors with imposed silences. What intrigued her was the loneliness that emanated from this man, as palpable as the luxury that surrounded him. "When can I start?" she asked, trying not to sound too desperate. "Now," he replied, surprising her. "The old maid left 2 weeks ago. The room is ready." He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, but then he simply held out the papers toward her. "You just need your documents to formalize the hiring." With trembling hands, Livia took the crumpled documents out of her bag. As she handed them over, her fingers accidentally brushed against Caius's, and she felt an electric current run through her body. He must have felt something too, because he quickly pulled his hand back, as if he had been burned. "Rita, the housekeeper, will be here early tomorrow morning to show you around the house and your duties," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "For today, I suggest you rest and dry yourself. There are clean towels in the bathroom off your room." He called the driver, a silent elderly man, to take her to the staff annex. As she crossed the garden again, now protected by a large black umbrella, Livia looked back. Caius was still standing in the doorway, his silhouette silhouetted against the golden light from inside the house. For a moment he looked as lost as she did. The room was simple but more comfortable than anywhere I had ever slept. A single bed with clean, soft sheets, a small but well-kept wardrobe, a bedside table with a delicate lamp. The bathroom was immaculate, with white tiles and a powerful shower that promised to wash away not only the rainwater, but also the memories of the past few weeks. As the hot water ran over her bruised body, Livia allowed the tears to finally come. She cried for the mother she had lost so early, for the childhood she had stolen, for the constant fear that had been her only companion for so long. But she also cried with relief, because for the first time in a long time she felt, if not safe, at least protected. Later, lying in her soft bed, listening to the rain still falling outside, Livia thought of Caio Montserrat. There was something about him that went beyond power and authority, a deep sadness, a loneliness that she recognized because it was just like her own. And as sleep enveloped her like a gentle blanket, she wondered what secrets that mansion held, behind its locked doors, and what stories her new master held behind those mysterious green eyes. What she didn't know as she fell asleep was that upstairs in the mansion, Caius was standing at the window of his office, watching the light, on in the annex bedroom. His thoughts, usually so organized and practical, were in turmoil. There was something about this girl, something besides her fragile beauty and frightened eyes, that disturbed him deeply. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him, without the flattery or fear he was used to seeing in other people's eyes. Or maybe it was because for the first time in 5 years since his wife's death, he had felt something other than the emptiness that had become his constant companion. The rain continued to fall, washing the city outside, while inside the Montserrat mansion, 2 lonely hearts unknowingly began a silent dance that would change their lives forever. The days at the Montserrat mansion had their own rhythm, like a song played in slow motion. Livia soon learned the rhythm of this new life, waking up before the sun, preparing breakfast for Caio to eat promptly at 7 o'clock, cleaning each room with almost religious care, organizing the books in the library, following a mysterious order that only he knew. Rita, the housekeeper, was an austere woman who seemed to carry the weight of many secrets. In the early days, she taught Livia the housekeeping protocols with military efficiency, which products to use on each surface, how to iron Caio's shirts with perfect creases, the exact temperature of his coffee. But there was something else in her tired eyes as she watched the new maid, a mixture of pity and silent warning. "Mr. Montserrat is a reserved man," she explained one morning as she supervised Livia in organizing the wine cellar. "Since Mrs. Helena, well, since what happened, he has practically never left the house. He doesn't receive visitors, he doesn't go to events. He conducts business by phone or video conference." Livia absorbed each piece of information like a thirsty sponge. Helena, it was the first time she had heard the name of Caio's late wife. Her presence still lingered around the house like a persistent perfume, especially in the locked room on the second floor, which Livia passed every day when cleaning the hallway, feeling an inexplicable chill. The weeks passed, and with them, Livia left her subtle mark on the mansion. The vases, which had always been empty, now displayed fresh flowers that she picked from the garden in the morning. The aroma of homemade bread began to perfume the mornings, bringing a touch of comfort to that austere environment. And, most importantly, music began to echo through the hallways again. It started almost by accident. On a Sunday afternoon, her day off, Livia was alone in the house. Rita had traveled to visit her daughter, and Caio was locked in his office as usual. Drawn to the piano in the main room, she approached it reverently. Her hands touched the keys delicately, afraid to break the sacred silence of that place. But the melody came naturally, an old song that her mother used to sing, something about love and longing. That was when she felt a presence behind her. Caius was standing at the door, watching her with an expression she had never seen before, something between surprise and fascination. "I'm sorry, sir." She hurriedly stood up, feeling her face burn. "I shouldn't have—" "Continue," he interrupted. Her, his voice softer than usual. "Please." Shaking slightly, Livia sat back down. Her hands found the keys again, and the music flowed, filling the space between them with something other than notes, a language that needed no words. When it ended, the silence that followed had a different weight. "Where did you learn to play?" Caio asked, taking a few steps closer. "My mother. She gave piano lessons," Livia replied, feeling the familiar twinge of pain as she spoke of her. Before I die?" he finished softly, and she nodded. Did your wife play?" she dared to ask, surprising herself with her own courage. A muscle twitched in Caius's jaw. "Helena loved music," he replied after a moment. "This piano was hers. No one has played it since." He didn't finish the sentence, but there was no need. Livia could feel the weight of loss in every unspoken word. In that moment, something changed between them, as if an invisible wall had begun to crumble. The days took on a new dynamic after that. Caio started leaving his office more, finding little excuses to be in the same rooms as Livia. Sometimes he would stop to watch her tidy the shelves in the library, asking casual questions about the books she was organizing. Other times he would appear in the kitchen when she was preparing dinner, commenting on the aroma that was spreading through the house. But it was the moments at the piano that truly brought them closer. It became a silent ritual. On Sunday afternoons, Livia would play and Caio would listen, sitting in his favorite armchair, his eyes closed, as if the music could take him to places he had long forgotten. It was on one of those afternoons that the first touch occurred. Livia had just finished playing a particularly moving piece, and her hands were trembling slightly on the keys. Caio approached her from behind, and his fingers lightly brushed her shoulder, a touch as light as a breeze, but one that sent waves of electricity through her body. "You remind me," he murmured, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "Remember what it felt like." Before she could respond, he quickly pulled away, as he always did when the closeness between them threatened to surpass the invisible barriers he himself had built. But something had changed. A door had opened, even if only a crack. However, not everything was harmonious in this new symphony that was forming. Livia began to notice small disturbing things, objects that moved during the night even though all the doors remained locked, strange sounds coming from the forbidden room, as if someone was walking inside in the darkest hours, and, most disturbing, the occasional visits from Isabel. Isabel Mendonça was an elegant woman in her 40s, who would appear without warning, always dressed impeccably in dark tones. She was introduced as an old family friend, but there was something in her gaze when she looked at Livia that made his blood run cold. It was as if she could see right through her, as if she knew all her secrets. "You're too young for such." "A demanding job," Isabel commented one afternoon as Livia served tea in Caio's office. Her smile was sharp as a blade. "And so pretty. It must be hard for a girl like that to remain professional." The way she emphasized the last word made Livia blush deeply. Caius, who was engrossed in some documents, looked up sharply. "Isabel?" His voice had a warning tone that Livia had never heard before. "Oh dear, you know I only care about your well-being." Isabel laughed softly, but her eyes remained cold. "After everything that happened with Helena." The silence that followed was piercing. Livia took the opportunity to quickly retreat, but not before seeing something in Caio's eyes that deeply disturbed her, a mixture of pain and something that looked very much like fear. That night, while tidying up the library, Livia found something she shouldn't have. An envelope fell out of an old book, a volume of poetry she was moving to a higher shelf. Inside was a photograph. Helena Montserrat, she assumed, a stunningly beautiful woman with dark hair and melancholy eyes, embracing Isabel, the way. They looked at each other in the photo, left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Livia felt her stomach churn. She quickly put the photo back in the envelope and hid it where she had found it. But the image remained etched in her mind, along with thousands of questions she didn't dare ask. The days that followed were tense. Isabel began to appear more frequently, always with her predatory smile and veiled comments. Caio became more distant, once again locking himself in his office for long periods. And Livia began to feel that she was diving into much deeper and more dangerous waters than she had imagined. But there was something else, something she kept secret, something that grew inside her like a weight and a promise. The morning sickness she tried to hide, the breasts that were beginning to ache, the fatigue that wasn't just from the hard work. Livia knew she couldn't hide it for much longer. Her pregnancy would soon become visible, and with it, all her secrets would come to light. One particularly difficult night, when the weight of all these secrets seemed to suffocate her, Livia allowed herself to return to the piano. The mansion was silent, and she believed she was alone. Her hands found the keys, and a sad melody began to flow. No longer her mother's happy songs, but something deeper, more painful. It was when she felt the tears on her face that she realized Caio was there, watching her from the darkness. He approached slowly, as if he was afraid of scaring her, and for the first time Livia saw in his eyes something other than the usual sadness. She saw desire, and fear of that desire. "Why are you crying?" he asked softly, his hand hovering inches from her face as if he wanted to wipe away her tears but didn't dare touch her. "Because sometimes," she replied in a whisper, "music is the only way to say what we cannot say." At that moment, suspended, between music and silence, between desire and fear, between the past that haunted them and the future that terrified them, something inevitable began to take shape. Like a storm gathering on the horizon, like a wave growing before breaking, like a secret about to be revealed. And in the darkness of the Montserrat mansion, as the last note of the piano dissolved into the air, two wounded hearts began to understand that sometimes the most beautiful stories are written on the darkest pages. Autumn arrived in São Paulo with an unexpected chill, transforming the mornings into a ballet of dry leaves in the mansion's gardens. Livia watched the golden dance through the kitchen window as she prepared breakfast, her hands working automatically, while her mind wandered to darker places. The pregnancy, now almost 3 months along, was beginning to show subtle signs that would soon be impossible to hide. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room when Caio entered the kitchen. In the last few days, he had created this new habit, showing up early even before Rita arrived, as if he were looking for moments of solitude shared with Livia. He was wearing a dark robe over his silk pajamas, his hair still damp from the shower, exuding a perfume that made her heart race. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep. His green eyes roamed over her face with an intensity that had become familiar. "Didn't you sleep well? You look pale." Livia looked away, focusing on pouring coffee into the porcelain cup he always used. "Just a little tired," she lied, ignoring the wave of nausea the aroma of coffee caused. "Would you like some toast?" "Livia," he interrupted her softly, her name sounding different on his lips. "When we are alone, please call me Caio." The seemingly simple request carried a weight that made her hands tremble. The cup clinked against the saucer as she set it down, and a few drops of dark coffee stained the white tablecloth. Before she could wipe it away, Caio gently grabbed her wrist. "I'm sorry," she whispered, feeling the warmth emanating from his touch spread throughout her body. "Don't apologize," he replied, his fingers tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Not for that. Not for being human." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the back door opening, Rita arriving for another day of work. Caio let go of Livia's wrist, as if he had been caught doing something forbidden, and she quickly pulled away, her heart beating wildly. The next few hours passed in a haze of routine activity, but Livia's every move seemed charged with new meaning. As she cleaned the library windows, she could feel Caio's gaze on her through the half-open door of his office. As she organized the books, her hands found small notes written in his elegant handwriting, stray thoughts, excerpts from poems, words that seemed meant for her. It was late that afternoon that everything began to change. Livia was in the winter garden, watering the orchids that were Rita's pride and joy, when she heard raised voices coming from the office. The window was half open, and the words reached her full of tension. "You're fooling yourself again, Caio." Isabel's voice was as sharp as ice. "This girl, there's something wrong with her, don't you see the signs?" "What signs, Isabel?" Caio's voice sounded tired, but there was a note of irritation that Livia had never heard before. "The same signs you saw in Helena." "Helena was different," Isabel hissed. She was your lover," Caius added, and the silence that followed was deafening. "Do you think I didn't know? That I didn't see the photos, the letters, all the signs you talk about so much?" Livia felt her blood run cold. The watering can slipped from her hands, spilling water onto the marble floor. The noise drew the attention of the two in the office, and for a moment her eyes met Isabel's through the window. What she saw there made her recoil instinctively, a hatred so pure it bordered on madness. "You'll regret it," Isabel's voice was now just a whisper, but it carried a threat that made Livia tremble, just like Helena regretted it. The sound of heels clicking against the wooden floor indicated that Isabel was leaving. Livia remained paralyzed, her mind a whirlwind of disconnected thoughts. What did Isabel mean? What had really happened to Helena? And why was that elegant and refined woman looking at her with such hatred? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound that made her freeze, footsteps coming from the forbidden corridor on the second floor. It was impossible, she knew. It was impossible. All the doors were locked and only Caius had the keys. But the sound was there, unmistakable. Light footsteps, as if someone was walking barefoot on the old floorboards. Driven by an impulse she couldn't control, Livia went upstairs. The hallway was plunged into the late afternoon darkness, and the air seemed heavier there, laden with secrets. The door to the forbidden room, Helena's old room, was closed as always, but something had changed. A white envelope lay on the floor as if it had been slipped under the door. With trembling hands, Livia picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, and the words seemed to have been written in a hurry. "My love, if you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct. She won't let me live with what I found out. But you need to know the truth about Marina's accident. It wasn't suicide. The documents are The letter ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted. Marina, the name hit Livia like a punch. It was her mother's name. But how? What connection could there be between her mother, A piano. Teacher from the countryside and the wife of one of the richest men in São Paulo? What are you doing here? Caio's voice made her jump. He was standing at the beginning of the hallway, his expression a mix of anger and fear. Livia tried to hide the letter, but it was too late. He had already seen it. "I'm sorry," she stammered, feeling tears begin to form in her eyes. "I heard a noise and—" "Give it to me," he ordered, advancing toward her with firm steps. As his fingers touched the paper, something strange happened. A draft of icy air swept through the hallway, knocking out all the lights, and for a moment, a single moment of pure terror, Livia could have sworn she saw a female figure standing in the doorway of the forbidden room. Caio must have seen something too, because his face lost all color. He pulled Livia away from the hallway forcefully, his fingers digging into her arms urgently. "Never come back here again," he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. "Never again." But it was too late. The past, like a hungry creature, had begun to awaken in the shadows of the Montserrat mansion. And Livia, carrying a life inside her and thousands of questions in her mind, knew that she could no longer run away from the answers that destiny was determined to reveal. That night, lying in her bed in the back room, Livia placed her hand over her still flat belly. The baby growing there was one more secret in a house already overflowing with them, but now there was something more, a connection she didn't understand, a story that began long before she was born, a mystery that involved her mother, Helena, Isabel, and perhaps even the child she carried. From upstairs came the soft sound of the piano, but it was impossible, because Livia knew that all the doors were locked, and Caio had gone to bed hours ago. The melody, however, was unmistakable, the same song that her mother used to play, the same one that Helena apparently also knew. And as the ghostly music echoed through the empty halls of the mansion, Livia understood that some love stories are written in much darker ink than we imagine. Sometimes love is not just about two hearts meeting in the present. It is about secrets that span generations, about pains that need to be healed, about truths that need to come to light, even if the price is too high. The days that followed, the incident in the forbidden corridor brought a subtle but profound change to the atmosphere of the Montserrat mansion. The silence between Livia and Caio had turned into something dense, full of unspoken words and unanswered questions. The few times their eyes met, there was an explosive mixture of desire and fear, as if they both knew they were on the edge of a precipice. Livia's pregnancy, now entering its 4th month, was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. The loose dresses and strategically placed aprons were no longer enough to disguise the changes in her body. Rita began to give her curious looks, especially when she found her leaning over the toilet in the early hours of the morning, fighting the nausea that seemed to be getting worse by the day. One particularly difficult morning, as Livia was organizing the wine cellar following Rita's meticulous instructions, a strong dizziness hit her. Wine bottles began to dance before her eyes, and before she could hold on to anything, her body gave way. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the basement as an ancient bottle slipped from her trembling hands. "Oh my God!" Rita exclaimed, rushing to her aid. The dark red liquid spread across the floor like blood, staining the hem of Livia's dress. "Girl, you're pregnant," Livia finished in a whisper, the tears finally escaping her eyes. "I'm pregnant, Rita." The governess embraced her with surprising tenderness, her strong arms wrapping around Livia as her own mother had never done. For a few moments they stayed like that, the smell of red wine mingling with that of tears. "Father," Rita began, hesitantly, but Livia interrupted her with a gesture. "It's complicated," she murmured, her voice cracking. "I don't even know if it was consensual." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Rita squeezed her hand tightly, and Livia saw a deep understanding in her eyes, as if the housekeeper also carried her own stories of pain. "Mr. Montserrat needs to know," Rita said finally, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't hide this forever, and he He has the right to decide whether he wants an employee in that capacity. The words hit Livia like a slap in the face. Yes, that was what she was. Just an employee. The moments of intimacy with Kaio, the looks they exchanged, the warmth of their accidental touches, none of that changed her position in that house. Fate, however, had other plans for that revelation. That same night, while everyone slept, Livia was drawn once again to the piano in the main room. Her fingers found the keys like old friends, and the music that flowed was no longer just a melody. It was a lament, a confession, a prayer. You play just like her. Isabel's voice made her freeze. The woman emerged from the shadows like an elegant ghost dressed entirely in black, her heels echoing on the marble floor like a harbinger of a storm. Like who? Livia asked, although she already knew the answer. Like Marina, Isabel replied, a cruel smile playing on her red lips. Your mother had a special gift for drawing emotions from that piano, especially Helena's. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Livia felt the air leave her lungs as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in her mind. You met my mother. Isabel laughed, a mirthless sound that echoed through the empty room. Oh dear, I knew your mother very well. Just as I knew Helena, two talented, sensitive women and equally foolish. She approached the piano, her long, pale fingers gliding over the polished surface like claws. They shared more than just a love of music, you know. They shared secrets they should have taken to their graves. Livia's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure Isabel could hear it. What secrets? The same ones you carry now, Isabel whispered, her eyes fixed on Livia's belly. Oh yes, I know about the baby, just as I know about your escape, about your stepfather, about the real reason your mother died all those years ago. Livia stood up abruptly, her legs shaking. You're lying. Am I? Isabel smiled, pulling an envelope from her bag. Then perhaps you should read this. It's Helena's last writings before her tragic accident. Fascinating how she mentions her mother and how they both discovered something about the Montserrat companies that they shouldn't have. Before Livia could react, a voice thundered through the room. Enough, Isabel! Caio stood in the doorway, his face contorted into a mask of fury that Livia had never seen before. He crossed the room in long strides, snatching the envelope from Isabel's hands. You've caused enough destruction, he growled, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Get out of my house now. Isabel didn't move immediately. Instead, her eyes met Livia's once more. Be careful, my dear. Some stories have a habit of repeating themselves, and not all of them have a happy ending. When she finally left, the silence that followed was deafening. Livia remained motionless, feeling the weight of Caio's gaze on her. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with an emotion she couldn't identify. How long has it been? He asked softly. 4 months, she replied, tears streaming freely down her face. Caius closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the impact of that revelation. When he opened them again, there was something different in them. A fierce, protective determination. You're not safe here anymore, he said, his voice hoarse. Isabel, she knows things that can hurt you, just like they hurt your mother, just like they hurt Helena. Then tell me, Livia begged, taking a step toward him. Tell me the truth, Caio. What happened to my mother? What did Helena find out? Why did Isabel... His words were interrupted by the sound of glass breaking upstairs, coming from the forbidden room. Caius paled visibly. Not tonight, he murmured, pulling Livia close to him in a protective gesture. Tonight you need to rest. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll tell you everything. But as he led her back to her room, Livia knew that the tomorrow Caio had promised might never come. The shadows of the Montserrat mansion held too many secrets, too much pain, too much death. And now, carrying a life inside her, a life that could be the fruit of violence or love, she no longer even knew. Livia had to decide, if she was ready, to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Dawn arrived grey and cold at the Montserrat mansion, bringing with it a silence unlike any other day. Livia woke up to the sound of rain beating on her window, her body aching after a restless night's sleep. The revelations of the previous night weighed on her mind like lead, mixing with the nightmares that had tormented her throughout the night. When she arrived in the kitchen to prepare breakfast, she found Rita already awake, a manila envelope in her trembling hands. The housekeeper's face was pale, marked by a concern that Livia had never seen before. "Mr. Montserrat left before dawn," Rita informed him, her voice low and strained. "He left this for you." Livia picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a hastily written letter in Caio's elegant handwriting, along with a sizable wad of cash and a set of antique keys. "Livia, what Isabel said last night is just the tip of something much bigger and more dangerous. I had to leave to take care of urgent matters, but you can't stay alone in the mansion. The keys are to the apartment I kept for Helena in the city center, Rua Augusta, 1842, penthouse. Go there immediately with Rita. Don't trust anyone else. I'll be back before dark with the answers you deserve. Caio." A shiver ran down her spine as she reread the words. Rita placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'll help you pack your things," the housekeeper said softly. "But first, there's something you need to see." Rita led her to the library, going straight to a specific bookshelf. With precise movements, she removed some books, revealing a small metal door built into the wall, a safe that Livia had never noticed before. "Mrs. Helena entrusted me with the combination days before the accident," Rita explained, turning the number dial with practiced fingers. "She said that if anything happened to her, I should wait for the right moment to show it to the right person." The safe opened with a soft click, revealing an old folder and a red-covered diary. Rita took the items reverently, as if handling sacred relics. "Your mother, Marina, didn't die in an accident," Rita began, her voice shaking slightly. "She and Helena were investigating something at the Montserrat companies, something related to a project called Black Narcissus. They found documents about embezzlement, bribes to politicians, and something even worse." Thunder cracked the sky outside, making the library windows shake. Rita opened the folder, revealing old photographs and newspaper clippings. In one of the photos, Livia recognized her mother, young, smiling, sitting at the piano, next to Helena Montserrat. Both looked happy, carefree, unaware that their fates were sealed. Isabel was more than just Helena's lover, Rita continued, her voice now a whisper. She was, still is, the mastermind behind a nationwide influence-peddling network. The Black Narcissus project was a front for large-scale money laundering. Her mother discovered it by chance, through old sheet music that Helena used to hide compromising documents. Livia felt the world spin around her. Her legs weakened, and she had to lean on a nearby armchair. But Caio, did he know about that? "Not initially," Rita replied, flipping through the diary. "Helena kept everything secret to protect him. She knew Isabel had powerful connections, people who wouldn't hesitate to kill to keep their secrets. But when her mother died, Helena realized she would be next. She began gathering evidence, documents, recordings." A noise in the hallway made both women freeze. Footsteps approached, high-heeled footsteps clicking against the hardwood floor. Rita quickly put the documents in her bag. "We don't have any more time," she whispered urgently. "We need to get out of here now." But it was too late. Isabel stood in the doorway of the library, a cruel smile on her red lips. Behind her, two men in dark suits blocked the only exit. "What a touching scene," Isabel commented, advancing like a snake about to strike. "The old governess finally revealing the secrets Helena fought so hard to protect. But did you really think I would allow this story to come to light?" "The documents are no longer here," Rita declared, her voice firm despite the fear visible in her eyes. "Caio already has everything he needs to expose you." Isabel's smile only widened. "Oh, dear Rita, do you really think Caio will do anything? He's too busy right now trying to figure out why his Swiss bank account was emptied and why his name appears on compromising documents that are being sent to the police at this very moment." Livia felt the blood run cold in her veins. You set him up. Of course, Isabel replied with an elegant shrug. Just as we did with your mother with Helena, and as we will do with you and this child you carry. Livia's survival instincts kicked in. In one swift movement, she grabbed a heavy bronze candlestick from the nearby table and hurled it at the main chandelier. The crash was deafening. Glass and crystal rained down on everyone as the library was plunged into darkness. "Run!" Rita screamed, pushing Livia toward a side door half hidden behind a tapestry, a service passage Livia hadn't even known existed. Chaos ensued. Shots rang out in the darkness, the sound muffled by silencers. Livia heard Rita's scream of pain, but she couldn't stop, couldn't look back. Her feet carried her through narrow, dark hallways, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to explode. He emerged at the back of the mansion, the rain now falling in torrents. His hands instinctively shielded his belly as he ran. Across the garden, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. That was when a pair of headlights cut through the curtain of water, a car skidding down the service drive. "Livia!" Caio's voice had never sounded so sweet. He was there, soaked from, the rain reaching out to her. Without hesitation, she threw herself into the car, and before the door even closed, they were already moving. "Rita!" she managed to say between gasps. "She'll be fine," Caius replied, his eyes fixed on the road as he sped the car. Through the wet streets. "She's stronger than she looks and my men are already there, but you and the baby are the priority right now." Livia finally allowed the tears to come, mixing with the rainwater on her face. Her entire body was shaking, not just from the cold but from fear, anger, and a deep sadness for the past she had just discovered. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small against the sound of the storm. "To the one place Isabel would never think to look for us," Caius replied, his hand finding hers on the bench. "To the beginning of all this, to the house where your mother lived." And as the car cut through the stormy night, Livia understood that she was only beginning to unravel the mysteries that connected her life to Caio's, her story to her mother's, her future to the dark past of the Montserrat mansion. The truth, like the storm that surrounded them, promised to be devastating. But perhaps, just perhaps, after it would come the calm that their hearts so longed for. The journey along the Seine highway that cut through the interior of São Paulo seemed endless. The rain had eased to a light drizzle, but the darkness of the night made each kilometer more tense than the last. Livia watched Caio's focused profile as he drove, noticing how his fingers tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, how his jaw was tense, how his green eyes seemed even darker under the intermittent light of the street lights. "Did you know?" She finally broke the silence, her voice hoarse from crying. "About my mother, about Helena, about everything." Caio took a deep breath before answering, as if each word weighed a ton. "Not from the beginning. I was too blinded by power, by money, by the image I had built. Helena tried to warn me several times, but I didn't want to see." He paused, turning onto a back road that wound between abandoned coffee plantations. The asphalt gave way to a dirt road, and the car rocked gently over the potholes. "When Helena died, I found some of her letters. Letters that explained everything about the Black Narcissus project, about how Isabel had turned part of the Montserrat companies into a money laundering machine. But it was too late. Isabel had already manipulated everything, forged documents. That directly implicated me in the schemes. I was trapped." Livia absorbed every word, her hands unconsciously caressing her belly. "And my mother? How did she get involved in this?" "Marina was more than just a piano teacher," Caio explained, his face softening as he said her name. "She had a special gift for seeing beyond appearances. It was during one of the lessons she gave Helena that she found the first documents, spreadsheets, coded as sheet music, transfer records disguised as musical notes." The car made a sharp turn, revealing an old house partially hidden by a bamboo grove. It was a simple two-story building with a wraparound porch and tall windows. Despite its apparent state of disrepair, there was something welcoming about. "Shas, your mother lived here," Caio said softly, parking the car. "Helena bought this property in secret, so that Marina would have a safe place to store the evidence they had gathered. But Isabel found out. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Livia could picture the rest of it. Her mother alone in this isolated house facing people who would kill to keep her secrets. Silent tears streamed down her face as they walked to the entrance. The key was exactly where Caio had said it would be, under a pot of dried orchids on the porch. The inside of the house smelled of mold and old memories. Furniture covered in white sheets looked like silent ghosts, and dust danced in the dim light of the lanterns they had brought. In the main room, a wall-mounted piano dominated the room. Livia approached it, as if hypnotized, her fingers tracing the yellowed keys. A sheet of music was still on the stand, the same music she had played so many times at the Montserrat mansion. Helena told me that her mother composed this song, Caio said, standing behind her. It was a coded message. Every note, every pause, everything had a specific meaning, a map to find the evidence they had gathered. Livia sat at the piano, her hands trembling over the keys. "Teach me," she whispered. "Show me how to read my mother's message." The next few hours were like diving into a musical puzzle. Caio, who had learned the code from Helena, showed Livia how each sequence of notes corresponded to different places, dates, names. The music, seemingly simple and melancholic, was in fact a detailed record of all the operations of the Black Narcissus project. It was when they reached the end of the score that Livia felt it. First as a gentle movement in her belly, then as a wave of nausea that made her stagger. Caio caught her before she fell, his strong arms wrapping around her with a protection she had never known before. "The baby," she murmured, placing his hand on her belly. "He's moving." The moment was interrupted by a noise coming from upstairs. Caio immediately pushed Livia behind him, pulling out a gun she didn't know he was carrying, but before they could react, a familiar voice echoed in the darkness. "Don't shoot! It's me, Rita!" The housekeeper emerged from the stairs, limping slightly, a makeshift bandage on her arm. Her face was bruised, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. "How did you find us?" Caio asked, still without lowering the gun completely. "Helena told me about this place," Rita replied, slowly approaching, "and I knew you would come here, especially after Isabel revealed her next move." "What move?" Livia asked, feeling fear rise in her chest again. "She's going to try to transfer all the money from the Montserrat companies to offshore accounts tonight," Rita explained, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. "And then she's going to disappear, leaving Caio to take the blame for everything." But she didn't count on that. The flash drive contained copies of all the documents Helena and Marina had gathered, along with recent recordings Rita herself had made over the years. It was the key to dismantling Isabel's entire scheme. "We need to act fast," Caio said, checking his watch. "I have contacts in the federal police who still trust me. If we can get this evidence in before Isabel completes the transfers." A headlight cut through the darkness outside, briefly illuminating the interior of the house. Then another and another. The sound of several cars approaching made the three of them freeze. "Too late," Rita whispered, her face pale in the dim light. "They found us." Livia felt the baby move again, as if responding to her own anxiety. Caio pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead in a gesture of protection and promise. "There's a passage in the basement," he murmured urgently. "Helena showed it to me on an old blueprint of the house. We can—" The sound of breaking. Glass from upstairs interrupted him. Heavy footsteps echoed across the ceiling, and male voices began shouting orders. They were surrounded. And there, in the house where her mother had lived and died, Livia understood that some stories need to complete their cycle before they find their true ending. The baby in her womb moved once more, as if in agreement, as if to say that sometimes it is necessary to face the past in order to build a future. The basement of the old house smelled of damp earth and buried secrets. Livia, Caio, and Rita moved in near total darkness, guided only by the weak light of Caio's cell phone flashlight. Above them, the sound of footsteps and voices grew closer and closer, like a storm about to break. "This way," Caio whispered, guiding them to an old bookcase leaning against one of the walls. With a precise movement, he pushed the heavy piece of furniture aside, revealing a low opening partially hidden by loose bricks. Helena showed me this passage in the original. Plans for the house. It leads to a tunnel that connects to the abandoned coffee plantation. Rita, still limping from her injury, was the first to enter, carrying with her the precious flash drive with the evidence against Isabel. Livia hesitated for a moment, her maternal instinct making her protect her belly as she ducked to pass through the narrow opening. That's when the first shot rang out through the floor above them. "Go!" Caius shouted, pushing Livia into the tunnel as more gunshots echoed through the basement. The sound of splintering wood indicated that Isabel's men had found the entrance to the basement. The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing them to move in, a crouched position. The smell of wet earth was suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on them with every step. Livia could feel the baby moving restlessly in her womb, as if it shared her fear and anxiety. "Wait," Rita whispered suddenly, stopping abruptly. "Do you hear that?" For a moment all Livia could hear was her own labored breathing and the distant sound of gunshots, but then she realized it, a low hum like running water. "The river," Caius murmured, his voice strained. "The tunnel. Must pass under the riverbed that runs through the property." As if to confirm her words, drops of water began to drip from the ceiling of the tunnel, forming puddles on the dirt floor. The sound of the stream grew louder with each step, and Livia felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. "We have no choice," Rita said, stepping forward determinedly. "It's our only chance to—" Her words were interrupted by a deafening crash. The entire tunnel shook and a cascade of earth and water began to fall upon them. Livia felt Caio pull her against his body, protecting her with his arms as the world seemed to collapse. "Bomb!" he shouted over the chaos. "They're trying to bury us." Rita had disappeared into the darkness ahead, separated from them by the water and debris that now partially blocked the tunnel. The water was now ankle-deep and rising fast. "The baby," Livia sobbed, feeling a painful contraction in her belly. "Caio, I can't—" "Look at me." He cupped her face in his hands, his green eyes shining in the dim light with a fierce intensity. "We're going to get out of here. I promise. I won't let anything happen to you or our son." Our son. The words struck Livia like a ray of hope in the darkness. She had never told him that the baby could be the result of the violence she had suffered, and at that moment she realized that it no longer mattered. What mattered was the love she saw in his eyes, the protection she felt in his arms, the certainty that, regardless of blood, that child already had a father. A new tremor shook the tunnel and more water began to gush through the cracks in the walls. Caius pulled Livia forward, guiding her through the increasingly narrow passage. The water level was rising rapidly, now reaching her knees. That's when they heard it, faint and distant, but unmistakable, the sound of a siren. "The police," Caio muttered, a smile of relief appearing on his dirt-stained face. "Rita must have managed to get to the other side and activate my contacts." But the joy was short-lived. A new crash, louder than the previous ones, made the entire tunnel shake. This time, part of the ceiling collapsed completely, blocking the path ahead. The water was now gushing in at full force, turning the tunnel into a death trap. "Come back!" Livia shouted, pulling Caio in the opposite direction. "We have to go back." They moved as fast as they could through the murky water, now waist-deep. The path back to the basement seemed endless, each step a struggle against the gathering current. Livia could feel her strength draining away, the weight of her pregnancy making each movement more difficult. It was when they arrived back at the entrance of the tunnel that they found Isabel. She stood in the flooded basement, a gun pointed directly at them. Her elegant suit was soaked through, and her perfect hair now stuck to her face, but her eyes shone with cruel satisfaction. "What a touching scene," she scoffed, her cold smile illuminated by the lightning that now streaked across the sky. Outside, the fugitive couple trying to save not only their lives but also their precious secret. "It's over, Isabel," Caio said, keeping Livia protected behind him. "The police are coming. Rita has all the evidence." "Oh dear, Caius," Isabel laughed, a mirthless sound that echoed through the basement. "Do you really think I didn't foresee this? At this very moment, my men are intercepting your precious governess. As for the evidence, she shrugged. Elegantly, accidents happen. Just like what happened with Marina, just like what happened with Helena. You killed them, Livia whispered, the realization finally hitting her full force. You killed my mother. You killed your own lover. Helena was weak. Isabel spat the words with contempt. She had it all. Power, money, position. But she chose to throw it all away because of a useless conscience. And her mother, well, she simply knew too much. A new tremor shook the house, more violent than the previous ones. Water began to gush down the basement walls, and the sound of splintering wood indicated that the old structure would not hold much longer. And now, Isabel continued, her voice calm despite the chaos around her, you will join them. A complete family tragedy. The corrupt businessman and his young mistress, killed while trying to flee with embezzled money. The newspapers will love this story. She pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot was drowned out by the roar of the water and Livia's scream. But it wasn't her or Caio who fell, it was Isabel. Rita stood on the basement stairs, a still smoking gun in her trembling hands. This is for Helena, the governess said, her voice thick with old emotion. And for Marina, and for all the others you've destroyed. But there was no time for more words. The entire house was collapsing around them, the water rising rapidly. Caio grabbed Livia in his arms and, following Rita, began climbing the soaked stairs towards the surface. The sound of sirens was closer now, mixed with shouts and orders being given. When they finally emerged from the house, the rain had stopped, and the first rays of the rising sun were beginning to tint the sky pink. Livia took one last look at the house where her mother had lived and died, now partially submerged by the river water and the secrets it held. The baby moved in her womb, as if it too was saying goodbye to a past that could finally be left behind. In Caio's arms, under the brightening sky, she finally allowed the tears to come, no longer of fear or sadness, but of relief and hope. Because sometimes you have to go through the deepest darkness to find the light on the other side. And sometimes it's in the middle of that journey that we discover that true love isn't just about finding someone, but about finding the courage to start over together. The weeks that followed the confrontation at the old house passed in a blur of testimony, investigations, and sensational headlines. The Montserrat Empire shook to its foundations as evidence from the Black Narcissus project came to light, exposing a web of corruption that stretched back decades and involved some of the country's most powerful figures. Isabel survived the shooting, but her empire did not. From her hospital bed in police custody, she watched helplessly as her scheme crumbled piece by piece. The evidence Rita had managed to preserve was irrefutable. Documents, recordings, bank records, all confirming Caio's innocence and revealing the true extent of Isabel's crimes. Livia watched everything from a distance, protected in a discreet flat in the center of São Paulo, where Caio had installed her with Rita. Her pregnancy was now visible, entering its 5th month, and each movement of the baby seemed like a reminder of the miracle of being alive, being safe, being loved. The lawyers finished reviewing the last documents today, Caio announced one evening, arriving at the flat with a heavy briefcase under his arm. His face was tired, but there was a different light in his eyes, the light of a man who could finally breathe without the weight of old secrets. Everything that belonged to Helena, everything that Isabel stole, it's all being returned. Livia was sitting at the electric piano that Caio had bought for her, a gift that helped her maintain her sanity during the long days of confinement. Her hands rested on the keys, and the sheet music her mother had written was open in front of her. And the house? And the she asked softly. My mother's house. Caio came closer, sitting beside her on the piano bench. It's too destroyed to be salvaged, he replied gently. But the land is still rightfully yours. Helena had put everything in Marina's name before she died, and now it's yours. Livia closed her eyes, letting the tears flow silently. It was strange how pain and joy could mix so well. The sadness for the loss of her mother, the gratitude for Helena's love that, even after death, still found ways to protect her. "There's one more thing," Caius continued, his voice taking on a different tone. He pulled a small envelope from his briefcase. "The DNA test results are back." Livia's heart stopped for a moment. All these weeks, that had been the one question she had been unable to face, the true paternity of the baby she was carrying. Was he the result of the violence she had suffered at the hands of her stepfather, or was it— "I didn't open it," Caius said softly, placing the envelope on the piano. "Because to me it doesn't matter. This baby is my son, Livia, not by blood, but by love. By the right, I have to love him, just as I love you." The words hit Livia like a wave of heat, melting the last wall of ice that still existed in her heart. She turned to him, finally allowing herself to see all the love that shone in his green eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, the words coming out naturally, as if her heart had been holding them forever, just waiting for the right moment to release them. The kiss that followed was unlike any they had ever shared. There was no more fear, no more secrets, no more shadows between them. Just the pure, simple truth of two hearts that had found in each other, not just love, but the chance for healing. Rita found them like that, hugging each other at the piano when she arrived bringing dinner. The housekeeper smiled, her eyes shining, with unshed tears. In her hands, besides the bags of food, was a newspaper. The headline announced the conviction of Isabel and her accomplices, officially marking the end of an era of crimes and forced silence. "Helena would be proud," Rita said softly, placing the newspaper on the table. She always said that true love had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. That night, after Rita went to bed, Livia and Caio stayed awake, talking about the future, about the house they would build on the land where Marina had lived. Not an imposing mansion like the Montserrats, but a cozy home full of music and light. About the baby that was growing, protected by their love, regardless of what the DNA test revealed. About the new life they were starting together, free from the shadows of the past. "You know what's funny?" Livia murmured, nestled in Caio's arms as they watched the illuminated city through the flat's window. "When I arrived at the Montserrat mansion that first night, I was just looking for shelter, a place to hide. But I found much more than that." "Found?" "A home," Caio added, his hands clasped over her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. "I found my story," she corrected softly. "My mother's story, Helena's story, all the women who came before me, and I found you." The baby kicked as if in agreement, making them both smile. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in its concrete and steel belly. But there, in that small apartment, a new story was beginning to be written. A love story that had been born from the ashes of other stories, from the echo of other songs, from the tears of other pains. A story that proved that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters, and that true love is not just about passion or desire, it is about redemption, about second chances, about the courage to trust again. And as the night wore on, soft and promising, Livia closed her eyes and allowed herself to dream, dreaming of the house they would build, of the garden they would plant, of the music that would once again echo through the corridors of their lives, dreaming of the future that finally seemed possible. Autumn gave way to winter, and with it came transformations. The Montserrat mansion was sold, not out of financial necessity, but by choice. Caio no longer wanted to live surrounded by the ghosts of the past, and Livia deserved a real fresh start. The new house they were building on Marina's land was just beginning to take shape, its foundations rising from the red earth like a promise of better days. Livia was now 7 months pregnant, her prominent belly carrying not just a life, but all the hopes and dreams that had survived the storm. The envelope with the DNA test results remained unopened, stored in a drawer in the flat, a mystery they had both decided to leave behind, at least for now. It was on a particularly cold afternoon in July that Rita brought the news that would change everything. Once again. They found this among Helena's belongings, the housekeeper said, handing Livia an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. It was hidden in a secret compartment in the mansion's piano, along with this. The "it" was a black and white photograph, faded at the edges but still sharp enough to make Livia's heart stop for a moment. In the image, two young women smiled at the camera. One of them was her mother, Marina, and the other looked exactly like Livia. "Your grandmother," Rita explained softly, noticing the confusion on Livia's face. "Aurora Santos. She and Helena were childhood friends long before this whole nightmare began." Livia traced the contours of her grandmother's face with trembling fingers. The resemblance was striking. The same wide eyes, the same soft smile, even the way she held her hands in her lap. But there was something else about the photo, something that made her heart race. "The piano," she whispered, recognizing the instrument the two women were posing in front of. "It's the same one." "The same one that was in the Montserrat mansion," Caio added, approaching behind her. "The piano that Helena loved so much belonged to her family." The diary revealed a story that no one knew. Aurora Santos had been a promising pianist, a close friend of Helena since their school days. Together they had dreamed of a life dedicated to music. But Aurora fell in love with Marina's father, a married man from a traditional family who abandoned her as soon as he discovered she was pregnant. Helena, then still single and heiress to a considerable fortune, took her friend in. She bought the piano that Aurora loved so much when she had to sell it to survive, promising to keep it until she could get it back. But Aurora died in childbirth, leaving only a newborn daughter, Marina, Livia's mother. "That's why Helena always protected her mother," Rita explained, her voice choked with emotion. "She felt responsible, as if she owed it to Aurora's memory." When Marina started giving piano lessons, Helena insisted on being her student, even though she was already a trained pianist. Livia sat down heavily on the couch, one hand resting on her belly as she took in every word. The baby stirred, as if he too was listening to the story of his origins. "But then Isabel showed up," Caius continued, sitting down next to Livia, "and everything started to fall apart." The last pages of Helena's diary were a painful testament to how Isabel had turned love into obsession, loyalty into manipulation, how she had used Helena's feelings to gain access to the Montserrat companies, how she had found out about the Black Narcissus project and, instead of reporting it, decided to expand it. "When Marina discovered the truth," Rita said softly, "Helena tried to protect her, but Isabel couldn't allow anyone to threaten her empire." Silent tears streamed down Livia's face as she turned the pages of the diary. The last entry, written the night before Helena's death, was a letter addressed to her, Livia, as if Helena knew that one day her words would find their true destination. "Dear Livia, you haven't been born yet, but I already carry your name in my heart. Your mother told me that if you have a girl, you'll call her Livia Aurora, in honor of your grandmother, whom you never met, but whose spirit lives on in every note Marina plays. There is so much I want to tell you, so much I need to protect. The piano I keep is not just an instrument. It is a legacy, a story of love, sacrifice, and redemption that began long before any of us. If you're reading this, it's because something went wrong. Because I couldn't protect your mother like I promised Aurora. But I want you to know that true love never dies. It just changes shape, finds new paths, resonates in new melodies. Take care of the piano, Livia. It is yours by right, by inheritance, by destiny. And when you play it, remember, each note carries the love of 3 generations of strong women who came before you. With all my love, Helena." The silence that followed the reading was filled only by the soft sound of the rain that was beginning to fall outside. Livia closed the diary carefully as if she were holding something precious and fragile. "The piano," she said finally, her voice little more than a whisper. "We need to bring it home." Caio nodded, understanding that home did not mean the flat where they were temporarily staying, but the new building that was emerging on Marina's land, the place where past and present would finally meet in harmony. "I've already arranged it," he said softly. "It's being restored by experts. It will be ready when the house is finished." Livia allowed herself to smile through her tears, her hand finding Caio's on her belly. The baby moved again, stronger this time, as if dancing to the rhythm of a song that only he could hear. "It's a girl," she said suddenly, with a certainty she couldn't explain. "And I'm going to call her Aurora Helena." Rita sobbed softly in the corner of the room, and even Caio seemed to fight the emotion that made his green eyes shine brightly. "It's perfect," he murmured, kissing Livia's forehead with infinite tenderness, and it was perfect. Because sometimes love isn't just about two people finding each other, it's about generations connecting, stories intertwining, songs echoing through time. It's about finding your place in a melody that began long before you and will continue, long after you're gone. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city as if to cleanse all remnants of the dark past they had faced. But inside that apartment, surrounded by Caio's love and Rita's protective presence, Livia finally understood. She was not just the last note of a sad song, she was the beginning of a new composition, one that spoke of hope, of new beginnings, of love that transcends time and death itself. And as night fell over São Paulo, she could almost hear, in the raindrops, in the wind whispering between the buildings, in the gentle movement of her unborn daughter, the echoes of a piano playing an old song, a melody that spoke of three women, three loves, three destinies that, in some mysterious and beautiful way, had become their own story. Spring arrived. In September, painting the world with new colors and endless possibilities, the house on Marina's old land was finally ready. Not an imposing mansion like the Montserrats, but a cozy home with large windows that let in light from all sides, a garden where orchids were beginning to bloom, and a music room specially designed to house the piano that held so many stories. It was on a particularly bright morning that Aurora Helena chose to come into the world. The birth was long but serene, like a complex composition that needs time to reveal all its beauty. Caio did not leave Livia's side for a second, their hands intertwined as if nothing in the world could separate them. When the first cry echoed through the hospital room, it was as if a new song had begun. Aurora was perfect, small, pink, with dark down covering her head and eyes that, when they finally opened, were a deep, familiar green. "She has your eyes," Livia whispered to Caio, who held his daughter with a mixture of admiration and fear, as if she were the most precious and fragile thing in the world. The envelope with the DNA test results was still sealed, now tucked away in a drawer in their new home. It no longer mattered. Aurora was a child of love that had survived violence, betrayal, death, of love that had transformed two broken people into a complete family. The first few months were a delicate dance of discovery. Aurora grew strong and healthy, filling the house with her smiles and chirps. Rita, who had refused to retire, cared for her with the same dedication she had once cared for Helena, telling her old stories while rocking her to sleep. The piano, restored and tuned, occupied the place of honor in the music room. Its ivory keys, softly yellowed by time, bore the fingerprints of 3 generations of women who had found in it not only music, but salvation. It was on a Sunday afternoon, when Aurora was 6 months old, that Livia finally sat down at the piano to play the song her mother had composed, no longer as a code to hide secrets, but as a celebration of all they had achieved. The notes flowed like crystal-clear water, filling every corner of the house with memories and promises. Aurora, in Caio's arms, seemed hypnotized by the sound, her green eyes fixed on Livia's hands that danced over the keys. "She's going to be a pianist," Rita declared with a knowing smile, watching the baby move to the rhythm of the music. "It's in her blood." Isabel had been sentenced to 30 years in prison, her crimes exposed in all their dark ramifications. Montserrat companies, now under new management, were beginning to recover, building a reputation based on transparency and social responsibility. But the true transformation had taken place in the hearts of those who survived the storm. Caio, once a man closed off in his own pain, had learned to smile again, to trust, to love without fear. His mornings now began with the sound of Aurora's laughter, with the smell of the coffee Livia prepared, with the certainty that each day was a new beginning. Livia, for her part, was no longer the frightened girl who had arrived at the Montserrat mansion on a rainy night. She had found not only love and security, but her own strength, her own voice, her own music. The story of her family, of Aurora, her grandmother who died giving birth, of Marina, her mother who died protecting, the truth. Of Helena, who loved and lost but never stopped fighting, was no longer a burden to carry, but a legacy of courage and resilience that she would now pass on to her own daughter. One particularly serene night, as Aurora slept in her crib and the moon poured its silvery light over the garden, Livia found Caio in the music room. He was standing by the piano, looking at a newly framed photo on the wall, the image of Aurora and Helena, the two smiling young women who had started this whole story. "Sometimes I wonder," he said softly as Livia approached, "if they can see us, if they know their sacrifices were not in vain." "They know," Livia replied, her hand finding his. "I can feel it when I play the piano. It's like they're all here. My grandmother, my mother, Helena. Like every note is a way of saying that we're connected, through time, through music, through love." Caio pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they stayed like that, dancing softly to the sound of a song that only their hearts could hear. Outside, the orchids in the garden shone under the moonlight, their delicate petals reminding them that even from the most difficult circumstances, something beautiful can be born. Aurora whimpered in her sleep, and they both smiled. That knowing smile of parents who have discovered that love can be greater than any pain, stronger than any fear, more lasting than any secret. "You know what's funny?" Livia murmured against Caio's chest. "When it all started, I thought I was looking for a refuge, but in reality I was looking for my way back home, back to a story that started long before me." "And now we are writing our own story," Caio finished, gently kissing her forehead. "With our own music," she agreed. And it was true, because sometimes love is like that, a melody that begins in the midst of the storm, that survives through the darkest notes, that finds its harmony in the most unexpected places. A song that, like the one that now filled that house, spoke of loss and redemption, of pain and healing, of endings that are only new beginnings. And as the evening wore on, soft and promising, the piano in the music room remained silent, not a silence of absence, but of plenitude. Because now its keys no longer needed to hide secrets or encode messages. Now they existed only to do what they were always meant to do: create music, celebrate love, tell stories worth remembering. Stories like Livia and Caio's, which proved that sometimes you have to lose everything to find something greater than yourself. That true love knows no barriers of class, time, or circumstance. That every broken heart is just a heart waiting to be reconstituted in a new and more beautiful way. And so, under the starry sky of a São Paulo night, while her daughter slept and her love danced to the rhythm of their own hearts, Livia finally understood. She was not just the heir to a story of pain, she was the author of a love story, a story that, like the music her mother composed, would continue to echo through the years, touching other hearts, inspiring other souls to believe that no matter how dark the night, there is always a new melody waiting to be played.